Next up is our Finance Report, Part 1. Mr. Rare.
Thank you. Back in December, district staff provided an update to the board indicating the impact of the tax law changes that came from the most recent legislative session and the November election by voters. So tonight we have Corey Fickus from Linebarger, who's going to provide a property tax update.
Corey, are you bringing friends?
I am. We saw LAF bring a big group and we wanted to bring some.
Thank you.
I know you all have this report, but I've added an extra piece of information here.
Need to please press the little red man there. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. My name's Corey Fickus. I'm one of the partners with the Linebarger Law Firm. We do have some people here that I want to introduce. First, I think most everybody knows Mr. Chuck Elsey, our esteemed local counsel. We've been working with Mr. Elsey since we've been working for the district, and it's been a really great partnership. He brings a great amount of information and context to our work to make sure that we're keeping in alignment with what your goals are. And so it's been a really great partnership. We've been really happy to have him and be a part of that team. Also, I'm going to start on this end. Cheryl Knighton. I think many people know Cheryl. She's been involved with LEF since the second golf tournament. Lives in the district, and she's been a major part of the work that we've done here. She's in our bankruptcy department in Dallas. But one of the big things is she was just promoted this year to be one of our equity partners, and we're really excited for her. She's been with the firm for, I'm going to say it wrong, I should know, is it 20 years? 21 and a half years. Really excited for her. She brings a great amount of information. So anytime your financial team gets an email about bankruptcy, it's all coming from her. I'm just putting it into lay terms. And then Jordan Stimson out of our office in Fort Worth. She's one of our partners that has been doing a tremendous amount of work for the district on our site visits and a lot of litigation efforts, and so wanted her to bring here as well. So that's our team here. We've got a lot of other people that are not here. Our bankruptcy department in Dallas has another 3 attorneys plus 8 staff, and then we have our bankruptcy department in Houston, which has been helping with our Bed Bath & Beyond issue, which we're going to talk briefly about. And then I've got another 7 attorneys in our Fort Worth office that also help with this. So I have handed out a report, and this is our report that covers the collection period from July 1 of last summer to December 31st. So this is the first 6 months of collections after the turnover in July. And I wanted to hit on just a couple real high notes. First, if you look at the second paragraph under collections, the first paragraph under collections, but the second paragraph on the page, it shows nearly $6 million in total collections. That's up over $2 million compared to the same period last year. That is partially in part because of 2 really big bankruptcies that have one fully paid and one partially paid. The first was senior living care. This one owed the district $1.2 million, and Cheryl and her team recovered that, I think, right in July or beginning of August. And so that was really exciting. And then the other portion of that is Bed Bath & Beyond. And we've talked, I think, a little bit before individually and with your team on the finance side about Bed Bath & Beyond. Everybody knows about the individual stores, but in Lewisville ISD there was a massive distribution center. That was one of your biggest that was your biggest taxpayer. So the 2022 taxes were paid. We're still fighting with them to get the penalties and interest paid for 2022, which goes to the district, and it's approximately, I think it's right around $200,000 that's still due for 2022 penalties and interest. Well, it's going to be more than that now because of interest. I'm putting it on Cheryl.
Yeah, so the amount that's currently due, when they filed bankruptcy around May of 2023, the 2022 taxes were delinquent. So any penalties and interest that accrued up until that time are part of the proof of claim that we filed on behalf of Lewisville ISD in the bankruptcy case. And going forward after that date, interest only would accrue on that claim. When the Bed Bath & Beyond got court approval of their Chapter 11 plan, it was a liquidating plan. They were supposed to pay those 2022 taxes with the penalty and interest and the additional interest. However, they only paid the base tax. So we have a motion pending in the court in New Jersey to get the additional funds paid on that claim for the 2022 tax year.
And so we're hopeful for that because it was part of the plan that was approved. Now, additionally, the bigger impact is 2023 taxes. They managed to convince the bankruptcy court to allow them to challenge the value of their property for 2023, and they lowered it significantly. The bankruptcy court lowered it from, I think, for the distribution center from about $15 million to just over $6 million. So they will get a new tax bill for all of that, but that means that their total liability, they have some other facilities that didn't drop as much. The overall liability will be about half of what it was originally assessed. So that should be paid. We anticipate that will be paid once they finalize the values, and it sounds like that's coming soon. The rest of the increase is just a lot of collection activity. One of the things that we've really been focused on the last several years is business personal property site visits. That's something that I think long ago wasn't really handled as heavily, and it's really important because a lot of these accounts are not big, but they're restaurants, they're doctor's offices, they're local businesses that are really impactful to the immediate neighborhoods, and they often don't understand business personal property taxes. So when we get there early, they can find out about their liability in the first year or the second year when it's still manageable. If you try to go to a restaurant and get $25,000 out of them, you're going to find there's not much there. I mean, they run on pretty thin margins, and nobody wants to buy used kitchen equipment or old tables and chairs. So we really have been trying to do a lot of work on that. Jordan's been a big part of that, and those numbers are in this report. And then, of course, just the general collection activity. So right now we're up about $2 million. On this chart, you'll see the breakdown of base tax collections and then a real odd number, which you look at that second number in the chart, base tax refunds of $3.9 million. That's huge. And we've had this issue in Lewisville for the last couple of years. In fact, a couple of years ago, Chuck and I were meeting with Paige, and I think that the refund at that point was $6 million. These have become very big. We discussed this at the last meeting here about how these large commercial entities will be driving their values down, and I won't go back into that deep discussion, but there are a lot of refunds that are coming in. Your tax assessor is very aware of that. The appraisal district is. There's nothing that can be done from here, from their offices, but we do put that in there so you can see the impact of those refunds because they are very large. Are there any questions on that? Because I'm going to skip to the next sort of bit of information. Okay. Briefly on litigation. Litigation is our last resort. We work really hard to try to get people into payment plans with the tax office or with our office. We try very hard to help them figure out what they can afford to pay before we have to go into litigation. So right now, as we stand through 6 months, we're at about the same rate of accounts filed on as last year, but slightly less dollars. Part of that, even though collections are up, right, part of that is because we're seeing a lot of payment and resolution before we get there. And that's a really good sign because that means people are taking care of it before we have to add filing fees, service fees, abstract fees, and then an ad litem if we can't identify all the parties. So we really try to avoid that. And then your resolved accounts, so I wish my timing of my staff and the reports all worked together because we just filed 25 judgments, released judgments this week. So up until this point this year, it's at $857,000, but it's over $1 million now with those released judgments. And the released judgments, the accounts resolved is a summation of the 4 numbers under that. I'm going to just point out a couple little things. On the next page, we've talked about our site visits. We've done 28 site visits just in the first half of the collection year. But the big time for site visits is actually in April when business personal property accounts are turned over. We've been working really hard to make sure that your property owners are visited. These are not homeowners. We are not visiting homeowners to remind them. These are only businesses, just so we're clear on that. Now, there's an article in the paper today about an issue from the appraisal district. This is a separate issue. These are businesses that aren't aware of their delinquency, and in most cases, they have no awareness of the liability, and we can see that by their lack of connectiveness with the appraisal district and the tax office. So we're working to help educate on that. That's the meat of the report that I wanted to talk about. I had some other information for you, and I was going to go over a handful of things. In the back of your presentation, there's a property tax cycle. If you were here a couple years ago, I brought this to you as a kind of an overall discussion. This shows the collection cycle for us, and so right now we're here at the beginning of February. Everybody that did not pay their taxes by the end of last week is now delinquent. It has not been turned over to us yet. It's still at the tax office. We will get those in April for business personal and then in July 1st for the real property. But they are delinquent. As you see it coming around, if you kind of look on the right side at 3 o'clock, you're kind of coming into the March area, and then you get down to the appraisal district. But right now, it's now 35 days. we are in the appeal process time for the property value studies. Now, we don't do that work for you, but your values were upheld and they were valid, although I understand that you will be challenging or protesting your T2 values. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So that's what's going on right now. And really in the collection, the tax world, outside of your work, that's one of the big things right now. Coming up, we're going to have appraisal challenges and appraisal notices. That makes everybody real happy. And then we get around to July when the new collection cycle starts. So I just wanted to give that for some context of where we are in the year right now. And so, again, in about 2 months, we'll start doing even more site visits on the business personal. And then very briefly, I know Dr. Rapp asked us to talk for about 90 minutes, but we're going to keep it a little shorter than that. We wanted to give a little bit of an update on just statewide what we're seeing. As everyone is probably aware, in the special session last year, the second special session last year, Senate Bill 2 was passed, which included a handful of property tax relief measures. One of them was a component that included compression, and then there was the homestead exemption, which increased your homestead exemption to $100,000. And so the big question that I think a lot of people have is, what is the impact going to be? Aside from your per pupil funding and your calculations for that and how the state's going to fill in, what we have seen across the state, while there are some variations, levies for this year are flat compared to the prior year, despite continued record valuation growth. And so that is coming from the compression and the homestead exemptions. So from our perspective, the big impact is going to be, we believe, significantly reduced delinquencies. First for homeowners, now they have a large increase in what they don't have to pay taxes on, so that'll be more manageable for them. So there's less due, but also an easier amount to pay. And then additionally, and we don't have the numbers for this yet, but we are looking for it, is your deferrals, and specifically your over 65 deferrals. Those individuals are eligible for a freeze of what is owed. The legislation that was brought in actually backdated their freeze to the last exemption. That didn't happen in the prior exemption, so they caught up. So now, if you know anybody that's over 65 that has a freeze, they got an outsized tax savings from somebody that's under 65. And the longer they've been, the older they are past 65, the greater the savings they likely got as their values have increased. And so that's going to be a big impact because, of course, those deferrals are locked up, and the individuals that are not paying, there's no collectability on those. They're entitled to an abatement from any collection activities, including judgment and tax sale. So we're going to monitor that. What our firm is doing on your behalf is we have a product that we sell to appraisal districts called a homestead exemption analysis, but where the appraisal district is not using that tool, we actually do it on your behalf. So what we're doing is we're monitoring all of your deferral exemptions. And what we're doing is researching to see, are these people still alive, right? If it's obvious that they're already deceased or they don't live there, we're notifying the appraisal district of that. We have no authority to change that, but we can notify them, and then they can ask for verification. There is a fairly high incidence of people that remain in their families' homes after they've passed, and they just keep the exemption, and they just keep paying the lower taxes, but they're not entitled to it. That's what we're looking for. So we're doing that on your behalf. And it's a little bit of a slow go because we have to allow the appraisal district's process to work, which is intentionally slow so that the individuals don't lose their exemptions, unduly. And so that's what we're working on. I think that's everything that I was planning to cover, but I wanted to offer some time for questions.
Are there any questions? Ms. Taylor?
I think this is just me being curious. When you mentioned the site visits, you said not waiting until they're delinquent to go visit the sites. Are you getting a list of new property owners, business property owners in the district? How do you find out who you should be visiting?
So we're going once they're delinquent.
Okay.
We're not entitled to collect on them until they're delinquent, and they come in our target rolls.
Okay.
We do try to make notes at any sort of chamber activities that we're
That's
at.
what I was
Yeah,
getting
we try
at,
to
if there were
anytime
big companies coming in, if you knew about that or
I don't know
rest of that.
how many people watched this work session, but now is really important, if you know small businesses, to tell them, get ready, contact the appraisal district, because the biggest deficit we see is them failing to render the value of their taxes. And the appraisal district doesn't know if this dentist office is smaller, larger, more advanced, less advanced than this one over here, so they give it a value that's comparable, and that's what's allowed. Well, that dentist office may have 3 less chairs, and so now they're paying more taxes than what they're supposed to. If they render, they fix that. They can say, I have 2 chairs, 1 X-ray, whatever it is, and that's been the biggest lapse we see in our business personal property. So we really try to educate them on that, especially at this time of year, because when they do that, they save the 10% penalty for not rendering, but they often save 20% or more in taxes because their values drop. And from our perspective, it's the hardest stuff to collect. It's the worst stuff to collect. You try to go sell dentist chairs. There is nobody that wants to buy used dentist chairs.
No market for that.
Barber chairs, dental chairs, and restaurants are really hard. And so educating them as soon as they become delinquent the first year makes a lot more range. But yes, it's after they're delinquent.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, as I often say, you're my favorite lawyers because we don't pay you. I thank you very much for your work on behalf of the district. This, of course, goes into our INS portion of our budget, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So just keep in mind, this is a separate separate bucket that we're going to be talking about. Thank you very much for your work. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you very much.